Always true.
She's known as Venezuela's Iron Lady, but opposition leader María Corina Machado is now in hiding. And from an undisclosed location, she received the news that she would become the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, recognized for leading a non-violent fight for change in Venezuela.
You are receiving the prize for, and here I quote directly from the announcement, for her tireless work promoting democratic rights for the people of Venezuela and for her struggle to achieve a just and peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy.
I'm honored, humbled, and very grateful on behalf of the Venezuelan people. We're not there yet. We're working very hard to achieve it, but I'm sure that we will prevail, and this is certainly the biggest recognition to our people that certainly deserve it.
A former National Assembly member and co-founder of the civil rights group Sumate, Machado went underground after being barred from last year's presidential election, an election she says President Nicolas Maduro stole, tightening his grip on power. In the months that followed, she became a symbol of resistance for millions of people, demanding a transition to democracy. In a conversation recorded before she knew she would be awarded the prize, her words already captured the same struggle that the Nobel Award seeks to return to the world's attention. As Venezuela's crisis deepens, the UN reports nearly 8 million Venezuelans have fled, escaping violence, hunger, and economic collapse. But the question remains, can she shift a system that has outlasted sanctions, protests, and political isolation? And how steep is the price Venezuelans are paying? Stay with us as María Corina Machado, Venezuela's opposition leader and now a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, talks to Al Jazeera.
María Corina Machado, welcome to Talk to Al Jazeera. I'd like to ask you the following. You know, you've been for 2 decades fighting for political change in your country, but elections haven't worked, mass protests haven't worked, economic sanctions haven't worked. Do you have a different strategy now?
Well, thank you very much, Lucia, for this opportunity. I think that after 25 years, Venezuela is a totally different country, a different society, and a different regime than it was just a year and a half ago. What we've seen is a social movement growing and growing day after day, a country that had been divided for many years under different conditions for religious reasons, racial reasons, economic reasons, ideological reasons. We brought it back together, and we were able to play with the rules of our regime in the presidential elections, and for the first time in 25 years, prove our victory. And this has brought a profound isolation of Maduro, since he has lost total legitimacy. So we are in a very difficult moment, certainly because the regime has decided to move ahead with violence and repression, but Venezuela is decided to move ahead and make the truth and popular sovereignty be respected.
But is that enough? I mean, you are in hiding. You have said that your life is at risk of being, at the very least, of being imprisoned. So you can't guarantee your own security. Edmundo González, the man that you consider the legitimate president-elect of Venezuela, is now in exile in Spain. So how can you bring about the necessary pressure, the necessary forces, to gather the necessary forces in Venezuela to bring about this change under those conditions?
Well, that is true. Like we're saying, every single person that was involved in this huge victory, in this epic journey, are right now either in exile or under asylum, in hiding, or in prison. That is true. And everything Maduro has left is violence. But that's not a signal of strength on the country. That's a signal of desperation. And the fact is that he knows that the only thing he's got left is the top brass of the military, because even middle and low ranks of the police and the military know what happened and want to change as much as we do. And the fact that Maduro has gone so far with practices that have been characterized as state terrorism by the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, or crimes against humanity by the fact-finding mission and of the High Commissioner and the High Commissioner of Human Rights of the United Nations, has further and further isolated Maduro to a point that even previous allies and other governments in the region that were close to Maduro have rejected to accept the fraud he pretends to perpetrate. So things are moving. And the fact is that Maduro will have to sit down and negotiate the day when the cost of staying in power outweighs the cost of leaving power. We are not there yet, but we are moving in that direction. And we need to increase every day that goes by the cost of staying in power so that he understands that his best option is a negotiated transition.
What is the incentive for Nicolás Maduro to do what you want him to do, and that is to step down and to accept Edmundo González as the legitimate president-elect of the country?
Well, that's the critical point here, because Maduro has failed so far that he can disappear people. He can put children in jail, accuse them of terrorism, torture them. They even detain women just because they were peacefully protesting or because they had tweeted and had images of our movement on their phones, and women that have even sexually abused. And Maduro feels that the cost of doing that is zero. So right now, we need to increase the cost of repression significantly and immediately, that those perpetrators realize that they will be held accountable. They will be held accountable for the crimes they commit. And the international justice has to work efficiently so that the rest of those individuals, which are the two pillars that today support the regime, which is the repression branch, armed branch, and the judicial branch, realize that they will be held accountable. So that cost should be increased immediately. That's one of the things that should be done. Another thing is a law enforcement approach. Maduro has shown the world this is a criminal structure, not a conventional dictatorship that has links with drug trafficking, mineral smuggling and contraband, and other networks of crime that bring illicit funding for the regime. These flows should be blocked, and the world knows where they come and can do a lot about it. So this is the kinds of actions that we need to be put in place very fast by the international community.
What you are describing seems to be a long list of actions that the international community needs to take in order to move the ball forward.
Let me be very clear. This is a process led by Venezuelans. And we are absolutely conscious of what's our responsibility, and that's what we have done. It must be understood internationally what it meant bringing up a country and a movement when the regime has used all kind of persecution, censorship against our people. And what we did was done by the Venezuelan people under the most extreme conditions, and we won by a landslide, 70-30. If we had had the minimum competitive conditions, believe me, this result would have been at least 90-10. And we had more than 1 million volunteers that were able, to display all over the country in less than 24 hours. We had the original tally sheets collected, digitalized on a web page so that the whole world can see the results, the actual truth that we want. This is huge. This is our part. And we did it at a very high cost of people in prison, people persecuted, people harmed in many ways. So this is a process that has been led by the Venezuelan people in Venezuela and abroad, because over a fourth of our population has been forced to flee our country. So, and we are fighting every day, and we are organizing, and we are protesting, even though it means tens of people that are detained every week. We have a robust strategy. We have a legitimate leadership. We have a united opposition. And the regime is as isolated as never before. So it is important to understand this has been a coordinated effort. So what we're saying is, certainly we need the international community to do their part. There are certain governments that, prefer to ignore the degree of destructions and crimes Maduro is committing for different reasons. But the fact is that there is not one single democracy that has recognized Nicolás Maduro in the world.
I understand, but perhaps aren't you risking, or aren't you taking a risk of underestimating President Nicolás Maduro's ability to resist? I mean, during the worst of times, he survived a crash in the price of oil. He survived harsh economic sanctions placed by the United States and other countries. Some of them have been eased, not others. He has survived protests, and yet he still remains staunchly and even more, I would say, fiercely in power. So how do you gauge that so that it doesn't seem like what you're saying is more wishful thinking than a real reality?
Yeah, I understand your point, and that's certainly what Maduro wants the world to think. Because if actors believe that no matter what he will stay in power, then you do not have incentives to act. Exactly. And in a process like this, the most harmful tool the regime has against our people, it's not even lies or terror. It's demoralization. It's taking out your will to fight. It's having people flee. Actually, Maduro's objective is to have millions of Venezuelans leaving our country. And it's something that it's absolutely worrying for the region, because Venezuela is already the biggest migration crisis in the world. I'm talking about over 8 million Venezuelans. Imagine if a fourth or a third of your population would leave your country. We're losing our children, a new generation of Venezuelans that find no future here, and they go through the borders, and there's no way you can stop that. Venezuela is not an island, and millions could go through Central America and reach the south border of the US. And that's what Maduro wants. And that's what we need to stop. Actually, we want those that have left to come back to our country. And this is the moment to act. We've never been closer to a solution to this conflict in Venezuela. Never. Never Maduro has been so weak and isolated, inside and outside the country. He's totally legitimized, and we know, and the world knows, the degree of the strength of a country that has come together. 90% of a population that wants change. So this is dangerous. It is, Lucia, because they're willing to do everything to stay in power. The point is that we are moving ahead, and every day that goes by, the cost of staying by force for Maduro increases, and we will reach that point in which it's unbearable, and that he realizes that his best opportunity is to accept our proposal of a negotiated transition in which we will give guarantees and incentives to move ahead.
You say that this is a struggle till the bitter end, that there's no going back. But what is the timetable? What exactly can you tell the Venezuelan people about how long this is going to take? Because they have in the past held up hopes for change, and those hopes have been frustrated, and we're still continuing to see, in fact, now even an increase in the number of Venezuelans that are leaving their country because they don't have hope.
And because economic conditions is a disaster.
Yes.
You have teachers that earn less than $1 a day, and the cost of living is increasing dramatically. I am very worried. So people have no option. And that's, again, what Maduro wants. He wants millions leaving, and he wants a country that simply gives up. And that is not going to happen. Because we Venezuelans know that this is a different situation. We've never been so far. I've heard so many times that it was impossible to do what we did. It was impossible to bring up a country. It was impossible to carry out primaries elections without the regime getting involved. It was impossible to reach the election with our candidate, a single candidate. That it was impossible to win, and even more impossible to prove our victory. And we did all that. Now we need to go one day at a time. Of course, there's urgency because there are human lives involved, because of the implications it has more, out of our borders in terms of political stabilization, and also because of the opportunities Venezuela represent, even to help in the world energy crisis, which is obvious that with Maduro in power, Venezuela will not take advantage of our huge potential. Venezuela can be turned in a very short time to the energy hub of the Americas and help all the region, all the Western dynamics. And finally, I do think that we have turned Venezuela into a global cause. I think that what we did was so huge. It was an epic event. And it was done by the people, by citizens that come together because they want to live with dignity and hope and justice, because we want to bring our kids back home. I mean, this is such a powerful quest that brings us together. And Venezuelans all around the country, all around the world, have come together, and we've been able to make our voices be heard globally. So I think Maduro is starting to understand that this will never be business as usual again, that he will not be able to pass the page as he has done before, that we will keep fighting, that the world will support us. He had crossed all red lines, and he will come. We will reach a point. He will understand that his option is to negotiate, and we are ready for that.
I'm going to get back to that again in just a moment, but you were mentioning the actual elections themselves, and I want to ask you, what more can you tell us? I mean, I know that the opposition was able to obtain the tally papers from the voting booths, from all of the voting, or practically all of the voting booths in the country, which was something that had to be smuggled out. And in fact, I read that they were smuggled out in suitcases. Exactly, how was this done? I mean, this was quite extraordinary, considering that it was done under the noses of the Venezuelan army that watches over the voting booths and voting areas.
That's a very important point, Lucia, because we wouldn't have been able to do what we did if it wasn't for the cooperation of the Venezuelan army that were displayed all around the country, protecting the electoral process. I don't have an answer why the regime didn't see what was happening, why they underestimated us to a point that they thought they will have sham election again and go with it. And we weren't going to be able to prove it because we had been working for years. And I had been calling people and training people all around the country. I mean, I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of volunteers that had been trained in every single polling station, 30,000 stations. And we organized communities because our voting monitors, which we call testigos, many were forced to leave because they had an order from the electoral council so that we wouldn't have access to them. And the communities brought them back in, and the military helped. And we had access to those original tally sheets printed by the electoral machines, and people risked their lives for them to protect them. They got them into their clothes, they took them to their houses. That night, we had places all around the country where we had internet, we had electricity, we had scanners, and we worked 24 hours in order to scan those tally sheets and put it in a web page, something that had never been done here or elsewhere. So as I said before, what we did actually sets a new standard for defending elections for the world. And I'm very, very proud to be part of this movement that has turned something much stronger than a political struggle. That's something I need to convey. For us, Venezuelans, this is an existential struggle, a spiritual struggle. And that's why this has no way back. But this goes well beyond, are the values that have come a country together, and that will be the pillars of the new nation we will build together.
Well, Nicolás Maduro controls the vast majority of the country's institutions. So if that is the case, how can you prevent the opposition's gains from being reversed?
Nicolás Maduro controlled the electoral council, and we won with the conditions of extreme conditions of the tyranny, and we won, and the whole world knows it, and he knows it, and the army knows it. So this is a moment in which we need to trust in our strength and in our strategy. We've had very important victories, one after the other. We have a legitimate leadership, and we have brought this country together. We need to coordinate actions with the international community. They must act now because they know what is going on in terms of crimes against humanity, violations of all rights and freedoms, persecution. The international community needs to coordinate with us now. This is the moment to act because the regime has never been as weak as it is right now. They have contradictions, they have tensions, there are being defections going inside the regime. So we need to move ahead and understand what is going beneath the surface in Venezuela. He wants the world to see just terror that he has put on everyone, but the fact is that the country is moving, and we will never surrender. And it's important for the world to know that this country is determined to live in freedom.
Are you calling on the international community to increase the sanctions against Nicolás Maduro and Venezuela and his government, much more than they had even been before? What exactly do you expect or do you need?
Absolutely. Perpetrators of violations of human rights, military, judges, prosecutors, police that have killed young people that were peacefully protesting, that have accused of terrorism, children of 14, 15, 16 years old, because they had something on their social media. those that have gone against the homes of our electoral monitors and have put crosses on the doors of their houses, those individuals ought to be held accountable. And the International Criminal Court has an ongoing investigation that has been strongly supported. They have all the proofs, and they have to send a clear message to all those that keep violating our rights, that the international community will hold them accountable. That will have a very important impact on the supports that have left, that are what Maduro has left at this hour.
Are you afraid for your life?
We are all conscious of the risks our freedom and our lives faced at this hour in Venezuela, Lucia, yes.
Nicolas Maduro has said that it won't be long before you pick, I think he said, Gucci luggage bags or suitcases and take off and leave the country. What do you say to that?
Actually, Venezuelan people answer that, saying that there were those same luggage that were used to send the original tally sheets to the hands of the Carter Center, who presented them at the permanent session of the Organization of American States. That's the answer. I'm here with our people, and our actas are safely shown abroad to the world. That's the truth. That's popular sovereignty, and that will be respected.
María Corina Machado, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you very much, Lucy. My pleasure.